peeling back those layers is really about, as prickly as they are, and is that like I'm getting to the heart, and I feel so much more solid today than I did even like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Hi there. Welcome to the Healthy Adult Podcast. I am Lori Jean. I am the founder of the PIVOT process, and I am so excited today to have someone that I just love to share some time with. So I would love to introduce Beck G. Hi, Beck.
Hi, LJ. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. I was talking with Kayla, who set this up earlier, and reminiscing about the first time I met you. And I thought it was in a psychodrama class that we were both participants in. And it actually was when you worked at Foundations.
The Refuge.
The Refuge. That's right. The Refuge. Yeah. At a conference many years ago. And then I was thinking, my gosh, I don't know if we've ever really talked about that.
Yeah, I think you were doing, it was in Dallas, and you were doing a talk, your crazy train talk.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we had a moment with Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Robin Cruz. Yeah, both of you were. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love listening to strong women speak about really about mental health topics, because it's usually just, old white men who are doing it. It's it was finally a breath of fresh air, and you were so dynamic. And I remember you were battling because there was rooms that were right next to each other, and you could hear the other speaker. And it was almost you were just having to be of course this would happen. I'm there's some guy next door, and now I have to be louder and even more dynamic, but you were just so composed. And so I remember that very clearly. One of my first conferences that I went to way back when. So
yes. And look at you now.
Look at me now. Yeah. Lots of life has happened. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've loved watching your career and watching you step into, so many different roles. My favorite role that you are in is being such an advocate for a community of people that really need that kind of advocacy and understanding. So I really want to thank you for that. So I would love if you want to share with our listeners and viewers, kind of share a little bit about your story and what you're doing in the field of mental health right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I have had a journey of self-discovery through the process of both recovery and school and working in the mental health field over the last 15 years. I started as, working as an intern and kind of moving my way up through the ranks and in different facilities and doing all different sorts of jobs in this in this field. And one of I think the most important jobs I've done and I continue to do is advocate for the LGBT community, specifically helping organizations and institutions be more supportive, accepting, giving a sense of belonging for LGBT folks. And I think for me, in my journey, and as so many of my colleagues have been through my journey, my gender journey, and coming out as trans, and my transition through navigating that in the workforce, navigating that in my personal and professional lives has just been really scary, really powerful, really exciting, really sad, really, just all of the emotions that can come with any kind of transition I've experienced and continue to. And so I think my real purpose here is in my life is to help others to feel more supported and get a better sense of themselves and a better sense of, you know, who they are. You know, we talk a lot about peeling the onion layers, right? Like, I mean, I think that's such a recovery. And, you know, I don't like onions. I'm using like this, and it definitely didn't come from me, and I don't know where it came from, but it's like, I would rather think of it as like an artichoke, also being from California, right? It's like spiky and all of that, but you take off the leaves and you get to the heart, right? And you like, that's where I want to get to, right? I want to get to the heart of the matter. I want to get to the heart of myself. And the more honest I am with who I am and what I like and what I want, like I become like more solidified in my life, I think, and solid. So that's been a process, and it's forever a process. Pivot helped me with a lot of that as well. And a lot of the work that I've done, personally, I really like am grateful for you and the work that you do up there. So
Yeah. Well, thank you. Oh, that was so well said. I love the artichoke analogy. So
yeah,
much better than the onion because you get down there, you're just crying and
you're just
crying.
you're just crying and there's no end.
And then your
Yeah,
breath smells bad. It's just all wrong.
I know, it's just wrong. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And that's watching you go through your journey of coming home,
hmm
to self in such a transformative way. Has just been really a beautiful thing to watch. And when I think about you, the word that comes to mind is brave. How brave you've been because you're well spoken and well respected. I think about all the companies you've gone in to help them understand, how to work and help and support their employees who struggle with similar things that you were up against as you were coming to find your own way and understanding. And it's such a gift that you have to offer. And my hope is that the listeners that are a part of Pivot or coming to Pivot really understand the importance of the individualizing way, that working with others to really help them come home to their self is so key.
hmm
It's just so important in somebody understanding and being able to really get into alignment all of who they are, right?
hmm
you know um, do you want to share a little bit about your process with, like, say, for example, the developmental psychology you learned through Pivot, and share a little bit with us your
yeah,
little journey?
yeah. So I mean, in my process of like knowing developmental psychology in and of itself, I mean, just like, it's like, it's kind of like what I know as like what I'm educated in, right? I mean, I work with a lot of teenagers and young adults. Like that's like my like kind of my pocket. And it's like, yes, I've learned all these things, but to actually like sit in that, like, right, and experience those things, I think that is like kind of the beauty piece of Pivot, where you actually like stand in these developmental stages of your life and are able to process from those spaces. Um, it gives it another layer of like understanding and meaning for me. And we were talking before, and we talk about the child, the teen, the adult, and the healthy adult, and what all of those mean, for me, and like how I stand today in a healthy adult way, if I can, right? Like, definitely not perfect by any means, but like understanding what that means, and understanding that that's the goal, or that's, not, I wouldn't say expectation, but that's like the goal that I have, is to stand in that healthy adult. But how I listen to those parts of myself through that process, and many times I think, what I've heard over the years, and people who've gone through that process, they stick with their like teen and adult. But for me, like, I knew I was a boy when I was 5 or 6. Like I knew, like 4, 5, 6, years old. I had the name Boy Roger. Like that was, like I named myself that. It was the 80s. I think like my sister probably listened to New Wave and was listening to Boy George, but it wasn't just Roger. It had to be Boy before it because I was very clear that this is who I was. And though people around me thought, oh, this is a phase, or, this is Beck being Beck or whatever. I was very set and that's who I was.
You
And
were
so
clear,
I was
right? You were clear. Yes.
very clear.
Yeah.
And so when I think about today, when I get unclear, when the feelings and the things are muddy in my life, I try to go back to that kid. Like I depend on that kid to show me the truth and stand in their truth, um because he was so true, like, right, like he knew he was getting in trouble for standing in his truth. He was being sent to the principal's office for standing in the boys line when everyone said he was a girl, like all of these things, right? But he was like steadfast. And so um like I think that, and doing the work at Pivot was helpful for me to recognize that, and rather than just like being like, oh, you're just a kid or you don't know that or whatever, like you're just hurt really easily, those kinds of things. It was like, no, 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 like you actually know. And so I try to go back to that space when I need to. And this is
Yeah.
a good reminder today for me too. Like, right. Like I wish I could I wish it was just automatic, right? For me to just go back to that. But I just like need consistent reminders when I'm
Mhm.
having, um, just like, I don't want to say crisis because like crisis sounds so big, but like, these experiences of self where I'm just like confused or like questioning or, what do I do here? Right. Um, or I'm having like stuff go against like my values, right? Or like I just want to like make sure I go back to him.
I love this. I love this. And what I'm getting from it is, your first stepping into advocacy was advocating for yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well,
really.
yeah, I wish, like, right, like I would when started this, like I would do these trainings, and it was prior to my transition, and I was doing all these trainings on how to be better for how to work with trans people. I was helping trans people come out to their families. I was doing all this work, and I was like really like advocating for myself in a way that I didn't know how to. Right? I was like, I'm actually like speaking for myself here. I'm not like, and but like because I just couldn't step into that yet for me. So
Yeah. And would you say that when you started that process, that have finding that internal strength to make sure that you had your voice throughout was probably really the most powerful thing that helped you stay true to what you were deciding, that you had decided you were going to do and follow through with? I would imagine that, um, I can't imagine. First of all, I haven't had your experience, so I take that back. But what I can identify with is just that part of ambivalence that other people put on you, that they want you to take and keep you in your confusion because they don't understand.
right. And I
And
think
then
that you have that experience. I think that there's this piece of right, and that's where I try to, in the work that I do, is really, rather than teaching people like I can put a PowerPoint on, I can do this, but it's like, how do you teach people that they also go through these transitions and these journeys and these feelings, like you just said, like these feelings of like confusion or these feelings of people putting you in this place, and this is where you go because this is who you are and this is who we think you are, and if you step out of that box then you're a bad person or you're not worthy or all those things, right? Like a lot of us have that experience, right? So you may not obviously have had a gender transition, right? But I mean, but you have, right? You have had your own gender journey, but like in the same way that I do, but that doesn't mean that you can't like understand the feelings, that the threaded feelings and emotions and the all of that comes with transition.
Mhm. Mhm. How do you handle, and how would you, because there's a lot of people that aren't as far along as you, nor do they have the understanding psychologically because they're not, they don't do what you've done for a living, right? How do you what would be your advice to give them, in terms of being able to, stand strong when they're getting hit with so much negative energy and criticism,
Mhm.
because I do know that, gosh, the suicide rate is so high. It
Mhm.
just makes me so sad that instead of getting curious with and helping people understand themselves more so they can make a decision for themselves, because at the end of the day, that's what's most important,
Right.
right? What would you say to maybe someone or parents or someone who is struggling with that right now? How do you help those people?
I think people fear authenticity. I think people fear truth and honesty. Like, I feel like that fear ultimately makes people hate, right? They internalize that fear, and then it's easier just to hate someone for no reason, right? Like, no actual reason. And the unfortunate reality is that, yeah, the suicide rate, the substance use rate, the rate of like mental health struggles, right? It's not, you know, people will say, well, trans issues, and it's like, actually, there's not issues being trans, right? Like, it's the issues outside of us that make it hard to like live our lives, right? That make it hard to, when you have, whether it be, laws being made, whether it be, families leaving you and saying like, we can't, turning their backs on you and those kinds of things, or not being
Judgment,
kind
right?
of job, right? Like those kinds of things are the what is increasing the sense of like, I don't belong here, or I shouldn't be on this planet, right? Or there's, it's a little, I mean, there's the overt like hate, right? Like people just hate you, and I would actually, to be honest, like would rather have that like the honesty of like, I don't,
So you know where
because
they stand. So
I
you
know
know.
where you stand, so I know where to not go, right? Like I would rather that than like this, like, yeah, like we totally love you and accept you if you're this way, right? This is, it's like this covert, like, try to shift and change you. And that, I think that's what people struggle with the most. And when I work with families in that way, right? It's like, well, and also we come from this place where being trans is a bad thing, right? Like what if it's not, right? Like what if it just is, and it's actually a cool thing, and it's like it's like it's automatically bad. Because I hear that quite a bit, like when people find out that I'm trans, there's this like there's this little point where it's like, oh, and it's like, either it's like, oh, you must have a hard life, or oh, like that, like and it's, I don't think it's intent versus impact, right? I don't think it's like intentional, but it's like, that it's a bad thing. It's like, no, we've been taught that it's a bad thing. Like there's been lots of people with lots of genders for forever, but we are stuck in this like kind of binary way of thinking due to many other things, that came before us, right? And so um I think like when I talk to families and when I talk to trans folks who are maybe not in my place, and I get in that place too. I get in that like why am I here, right? I have that, and I want to be honest about that, because I don't think like it's like, skipping on a sunbeam to Jesus, like all the time. It can be hard, but I do have this privilege of like walking in the world and not having people, you know automatically assume something that I am or that I'm not. So when I talk to young people who are going through this process or who are starting this process, it's like really getting at what is your truth? Like what is good for you, right? What is going to be the healthiest place for you to be? What do you need? How do you find people around you that like can support you? If it's not your family, there's a chosen family. And a lot of us, not just LGBT people, I think sober people have chosen family, people who didn't get along with their family have chosen family, right? We build our own family, right? And so and sometimes, yeah, that can be your biological family, great, but that doesn't have to be true. So find people that will love you for you. And and it can be really hard. It can be really it can feel like it's never going to happen. And so I just, I stick with them. I stick
Mhm.
with them.
That's so well put. It's beautiful, actually. I love the essence of what you're sharing, which is so important. And it's what you're all about is like just let's get to the truth of what is for you and being honest about it. This tone of honesty that you're sharing with us today, I think is really the key. Because I would imagine that, and I know you well enough to know that, you've probably also seen people that think they might be and find out they're not. I mean, whatever their truth is, right? The journey is, and that's what is so cool about the work that you do. You're just so open and authentic and honest about that because that is where the freedom comes.
Right.
We use a term at Pivot called relational freedom, and people are like, what is that? I'm like, I know it sounds like a Hallmark card or Instagram post. It sounds like whatever, right? But it's when you are really free to be who you need to be in the world, then you can be relational with other people from that place. And that's something that nobody can ever take away from you.
Right.
No one
100%.
can ever take that away from you.
And
Yeah.
it's hard. I think it's hard to, in my experience of the way, in which my transition happened, right, is that, I was socialized female for so long and going into men's spaces, right? It feels very uncomfortable, right? It still feel, and then it feels uncomfortable to be in a women's space, right? For me. And so it's like it's that like you have to kind of push yourself to like feel the uncomfortability so that you can get more comfortable. And like a lot of people don't have that wherewithal. I think like I think that's something too. It's like, going into like a men's space, like, men talk a lot different. Like it's, it's
Oh,
wild.
do tell, do tell.
I know, right? I do. I feel like I'm like a spy, like I'm a junior spy. I've gotten to these worlds. I know exactly what it's like in a women's locker room. I know exactly what it's like in a men's locker room. And to be honest, they're actually very similar in a lot of ways, right? Like the way women talk, with women is very similar to the way men talk with men. And it's kind of this like interesting dynamic, but there are times where I might be with a group of men where I'm like, I don't like the way you're talking right now, right? I'm
Mhm.
not like, that's not for me to like, I stand up for women. I stand up for, it's like, but like, then I have this like, again, this like little internal crisis of self, like, oh, if I say something, they're gonna they're not going to like me. They're going to deny me. They're not going to hang out with me, all those things. And it's like, or do I say something and I teach them, right, a different way of being? Like, come on, guys, like, we don't need to talk like that, like, can we talk about it something different? Or can I change the subject or whatever I need to do, right? But that is like a sense of like, that's also growth for me because, maybe 5 years ago, I would have just let it go. Now, today, I'm like, all right, I'm like too old for that, like, and I get to be
Yeah.
I get to like show up and I've gotten to define what being a man means to me, which I think a lot of men in general don't get that. They have been taught the way to be a man by other men, whereas me, like I get to like I've been taught to be a man by some of the men in my life, and I've also got taught to be like what kind of man I don't want to be by some of the men in my life, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a really cool experience. And so I actually bring that into working not just with trans people. Like I bring that into working with the young men that I work with who are not trans, get to help teach them that they get to show up, you know, and be the kind of man that they want, because I think that that's super important. And so I think like this is like my, again, the work that I do, the person that I am, it translates to it can translate to everyone's like journey into being who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting when you were talking about, thank you for sharing all of that. It was interesting when you were talking about going into the different spaces, you know, men and then the women's and, you know, kind of what you struggle with there. And it reminds me of the concept of duality, right? Being able to hold those two places together. And I think that that's something that people can really relate to, you know, with you for sure. Because when you look at, you know, like, okay, so over here, I've got work and my life and who I am. And over here, I have some complexities and some past traumas that get in the way of me being in my healthy adult and being able to hold that duality in places where I'm not safe, but I need to be, you know, having that, you know, that being Malcolm in the middle, if you will, with all of that is something that I think everybody can relate to if they really think about it through that lens. So I love that you're talking about that, because that is something that I'm sure that you speak to and teach when you're helping people, that because you do need to hold that duality inside of yourself so that you can get to who you are. You know, I remember when I first heard the concept of using the term they instead as a pronoun instead of he or she, you know, and I got it right away.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got it right away. And it's amazing to me how many people don't get why that's important for some people.
Yeah.
Because what that does is that gets them in grounded in who they are in a way that this is true for me. It's not confusion.
Right.
Other people are confused by it, but it's not confusion. It's like, I don't want to hold this like this. I want to just be one.
Right. Yeah, and I love that. I think that there's, you know, I battle that so much, you know, in the world like of teaching people in that way. And it is like this concept of like, yeah, we can be all, we can be both, we can be none, we can be, you know, it's like and like as like someone who teaches is like it's like such an easy, I think we make it harder than it is, right? We don't like actually see the person, you know, if we're not using, you know, if they asked us to use they them pronouns, if that's who they are, like great. And we, you know, if we're not using it, like I get like sometimes it's like a mistake, right? However, right, but like if we like refuse, if we're refusing to use that for a person, it's like then we're not seeing their humanity and we're not seeing them for who they are, right? And it's like we're dismissive, and how dare we? How dare we dismiss someone's humanity, right? Like who are we to dismiss someone in
That's
that way?
right. That's right. Um, uh, when you did a training for all of my pivot coaches,
Mhm.
you were so good, by the way. And you said something that really hit home for me and has really helped in our work that we do with others. And what you shared, looking back, it was so simple, but it was like, you know, duh. And it was when one of my coaches asked you the question, like, you know, well, what do I do? Because I don't know, like, what to say or how to reference who they are or the pronoun or they, you know, these questions of not knowing. And you were so cute. You're like, ask,
Mhm.
just ask how somebody wants to. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
ask. It's just like, what do you want me to say? How do you want me to, you know, call,
Yeah.
what do you want me to call you? Like, I love that. And it just takes it eliminates so much of the confusion, and it really lends itself to create connection,
Yeah.
because the person asking is just simply being curious so that they can do no harm and have conversation and lean in and understand more, right? And
Yeah.
it's changed. I've watched some of those coaches that were on that call. It's changed their approach. Not that they weren't good before, but it really helped them hone in to not forget something that simple
Yeah.
is probably the most humane thing you can do when you're working with somebody where you don't really understand.
Right.
You really want to continue to get curious with what they're doing or what needs to be said, because unfortunately for, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, for the trans community, it is something that people just get confused by,
Hmm.
don't understand, or they have some kind of belief system that will prohibit them
Right.
from getting curious and understanding. So that's where the circle boundaries, I think, are so important for
Sure.
people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Curiosity is a really, I think, there are things we can be curious about around someone's pronouns or name, or like those things that is not curiosity that goes, there's like a line, right? Like, like if you want to know other things, like if you're like
mhm,
anything that's underneath my clothes, like all that stuff, like you can go online, right? Like I don't need, like I don't ask you about what's underneath your clothes. Like don't, like it doesn't matter, right? But if you're curious about like, yeah, what are your pronouns, right? Like I use,
mhm,
he, him. What are your pronouns, right? And it's
mhm.
just like such a simple ask, but I think we're so afraid to get it wrong. We're so
Exactly.
afraid to step into our own humility, our own vulnerability. We're so,
Mhm.
you know, that if we ask, if we get it wrong, then we're a bad person, right? But we're missing the concepts, right? We're missing, like, again, someone's humanity and being able to show up for someone.
Right.
I think if we want to see people, like I think that in my experience with working with trans folks is like, yeah, when people ask, are curious, or just, not seeking to learn about the trans community,
Mhm.
right? Like, but asking as a way to get to know me as a person.
That's right.
It's very different. There's a very different air about that. Like, don't be like your trans friend or your trans kid or your trans coworker does not need to train you on what it's like to be trans. Like, there's people like me to do that for you, right? But like,
Yeah.
but like, if you want to know someone as a human being and what that is, like, because I think I like to say, like, being trans is probably one of the most boring things about me. I have so many more things that, like, I would rather talk about. And I think that's why trans people love to, like, spend time with other trans people, because it's like we don't have to talk about being trans. We can actually talk about the things we like to talk about.
That's right.
Other than that, is that, like, we have so many other things that
Yeah.
we are
I
interested
think about our friendship. I don't think you and I have ever really, this is the most we've ever talked about it.
in. Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, I mean, we never,
There's
we do
more
talk
to talk
about
about.
a
Right.
lot of other stuff, yeah, we have similar parts of self that get along. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cute. Yeah. That's really good too. Yeah. In fact, I'm like sitting here, I can notice myself thinking, well, shit, I probably should have just done this podcast and not even talked about it.
No, it's fine. No, because I think in these, like, podcasts in this way is like it's about learning, right? It's
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
again, like this is my story, it's my truth. And um, do I want to talk about it when I'm getting burgers and stuff? Not really, but in these kind of spaces it's good for people to hear. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I think what happens with, like, you know like you said, like confusion, or when someone's confused, or someone like has like kind of, maybe some, you know religious way, or whatever it is, that keeps them from from connecting with trans people is that like they haven't met someone who's trans, right? I think I get a lot of times, like sometimes I'm the first trans person that some people have met. And again, this is intention versus impact, but they're like, you're so normal. And I'm like, well, I'm not, but I am, right? I have a very boring life. I have 2 dogs. I have a boyfriend. I like to watch Netflix. I like, I'm in recovery. I I work. I'm. It's like the Us magazine that's like they're like when the stars are people too. They just, yeah. I go to the grocery store. I hate Trader Joe's parking lots. Like
Yeah.
I just like how
Hair days.
yeah, like I had a midlife crisis and got a nose ring, like things like that. Like it's just like whatever, like this is like my, like this is my life, and it's not like as complicated as things are. But the thing is that I'm happy today. And if I didn't get to live this life that I'm living right now, I would be dead. Like that's like in and of itself, right? If I would not have gotten to experience this boring ass life without being able to transition. You know what I mean? And we should allow people to be who they are so that they can have boring lives too. Like, I'm just, you know, I
I
get
get what you're saying, though. Just
I use deflection that it's
yeah.
heavy, but but that's my truth. It's like people should be able to, you know, to do what they want as long as they're not causing harm to others and themselves.
Yeah.
Right? And if it's bringing people joy, like what is wrong with some more joy in this world today?
Mhm. That's right. We need more, a lot more,
A lot more.
a
A
lot
lot.
more. Yeah.
I mean, I've taken, it's funny too, like I've taken like straight cisgender boys to go get their nails done, and they do this thing where it's like, oh my gosh, am I gay? Does this make me, like doing anything like effeminate, and I'm just like, listen, pedicures are the best thing in the world. And girls really like guys with like nice fingernails and nice feet. Like you can do that, right? Like it's like stepping out of these, like trying to like help young people like step out of these boxes again that they get put into. Right. I think we have a crisis of masculinity because so many boys are put into these boxes to say, this is who you are. Right. And so
And
we
a
just,
role reversal for women.
sure, 100%. Like you need to be this way. And it's a
Yeah.
crisis for them. Like, I
Oh,
have a friend.
it is. I mean, I chased perfection for years.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, just for years. And I grew up in the supermodel age,
Mhm.
where we
Right,
all needed to be, skinny and beautiful. And we
right.
didn't need to, but I felt the pressure because my family dynamics at home were so unhealthy that I
Mhm.
was looking outside for where do I belong. So, that's a whole nother conversation, isn't it?
That is, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious, though. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, and I would like to just kick it over to your life today. Like, what are you doing for the holidays? And tell me a little about this boyfriend. I've seen you on social media, and I have to just tell you, I'm so happy for you. And you guys, I mean, you are not boring.
We're
The
not,
places that
not
you
boring.
go, the outfits that you wear, the things that you do. I'm like, oh, I wish they
I
were
know.
my viewers.
I know. Yeah, we're not boring. I definitely, have more and more outfits in this last year than I think I ever have. Like we went to Beyonce and and it was the first time I wore a full like bejeweled cat suit. Like it's just like what is happening? It's like, like talk about uncomfortable. Talk about like shopping in the women's section as a trans. I mean, I had a full again like I had like full trauma, like sweating, like I'm like, oh my gosh. And he's like, well, I'm gonna wear this dress with all these pearls. And I'm like, okay, like we're doing this. We're doing this, but just an amazing time. And just, I think yeah, my life has kind of exploded and it's like it exploded in all the painful and amazing ways that everything could have happened in the last year. And I'm so grateful for recovery and for friends and for people who like have shown up for me and like have held me in like some of my most difficult, painful times and some of my most beautiful times. Yeah, just, spending some time with my family for the holidays. I'm like a 24-hour family, time kind of guy, which is great. Like I can show up and be um and spend really quality time with my family in a short period. Um and then yeah, looking forward to the new year, doing some traveling, doing some, gonna finally go see Taylor Swift in concert in London in the next year, which I'm very excited about. I've always wanted to go to Wembley Stadium to see a concert, and ever since I saw like, I think it was like watching videos of like Queen and like seeing them at Wembley Stadium, I've been like, I want to go there. So now we're gonna go see T Swift, and just gonna go to Belgium for the first time in the winter, which will be very cold. But just I'm really, I think with this new partner and I, like um he really taps into the joy of my kid, right? Like, and like that, and also the fire of my teenager. We can fight, and but we can also come into like, we
You can
we have,
get to home plate and you're healthy adult quicker,
yeah, we have
probably.
conflict, and then we step back and we're like, okay, let's do that different next time. Right. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that I learned like around like the circle boundary stuff has been so important, with a pretty significant like breakup and change in that. Like that's been really important to me over the last year of like understanding like who I bring into my circles and who I don't, and how I can love someone who is, not part of that inner circle, part of my goods, but I can still love them. And how I can shift some of that has been really important for me, and who I share my truth with, and how I share, because I
Mhm.
think like years ago I probably would have shared all of my trauma and sadness on social media, you know,
Oh,
to
yeah.
get that. And
Oh,
there's sometimes I share stuff, but it's not like how I would have in the past, where it was like, please see me, I need this, right? Instead, I really went like internal to my goods, to my therapist, to doing work around it. And I feel like I came out stronger, better, faster, really, and more stable in my decisions that I had to make. I had to come out all over again. I've come out so many times over the
mhm.
last, 25 years of my life.
Mhm.
Um, but when again, like I talk about like this, that artichoke, just to kind of like wrap back up into like the beginning, right? Like, peeling back those layers is really about, as prickly as they are, and is that like I'm getting to the heart, and I feel so much more solid today than I did even like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, which, at that point is when you saw me, like right when I was in that space.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm just so happy for you. I
Thank
really am. Yeah. And I can't thank you enough for just coming on and sharing your heart and your honesty. And
course.
um, one more question though. What are you watching on Netflix? You always tell me about the best shows.
Yeah, I'm
what
watching.
What are
I
you
mean,
watching
British
lately?
British Bake Off, because that's like always
I
my
love that
goal.
show. Yeah.
I just need like some good love, and but I'm like really into like any kind of like Survivor, RuPaul's Drag Race, Dragula, like any kind of like competition show these days, like I'm really into. Like I'm really
Mhm.
into the story. I'm really into why people are doing it. I'm really
Mhm.
into like watching those like cheesy like love ones, like Love Is Blind. Oh man. I mean, I
Yeah.
love messes too to be like, I am so glad I'm not there. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's like when I used to when I was, drinking and using, I used to watch Cops and I'd be like, well, it's not that bad, you know. That's how I feel about these shows. So
Oh, I was using a lot of discernment when I chose a relationship.
exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah.
I make different choices today, which I'm very grateful for in my relationships. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And I hope you guys have a very happy holiday. And I'll look
Thanks.
forward to connecting.
Yes, you too. Always here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for anyone listening, what if somebody would like to contact you to get some education or help? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can go on my website, bgcbridge.com. You can look me up, Beck G. Probably find me on the internet somewhere. But yeah, you can, or you can email me, Beck at bgcbridge.com. And I'm glad
Great.
to help train anything. I'm actually doing a training for a fashion line coming up, which I'm very excited about, to talk about gender and fashion and what that all looks like. So,
Oh, wow. Keep me posted.
well, yeah.
I always like a good fashion story.
A good fashion story, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Aw, well, thank you again so much. And, happy holidays. And yeah, just lots of love.
Lots of love to you too.
Lots of love. All right, sweetie. Take care.